Welcome to the fourth meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Status of Women. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of September 23rd, 2020. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, and the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. With regard to the speaking list, the clerk and I will do the best we can to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they are virtual or in person. I would ask committee members as well if they could join the meetings 15 minutes early for future so that the technicians can do all the sound checks and we can get started always on time. Today, our study is the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on women. And for the benefit of our new witnesses, before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. And when you're ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. All comments should be addressed through the chair. And interpretation in this video conference will be very much like in regular committee meetings. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen to choose English, French, or the floor, which gives you whatever's being spoken. When speaking, speak slowly and clearly so that the translators can do their work. And when not speaking, your mic should be on mute. And so now I'd like to welcome our witnesses, who will begin their discussions with 5 minutes of opening remarks. We have today from Pink Attitude Evolution, Ruby Dillon, who is the founder, president, and board chairperson, and Jaspreet Sandhu, who is the executive producer and officer, National Research Study. And we have aussi de Réseau FADOC.
From the FADOC network, we have Gisèle Tassé-Goodman, president, and also Philippe Poirier-Monette, I think. Welcome, and we'll start.
Attitude Evolution. Go ahead, Ruby.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chairs, and committee members. It is a pleasure to be here today. My name is Ruby Dillon. I am the founder and president of the Pink Attitude Evolution. I'm joined here today with my fellow officer and executive producer, Jaspreet Sandhu. Pink Attitude Evolution is a non-for-profit organization in Canada with a mandate to empower South Asian women to achieve their full potential in their chosen endeavor, to ensure that we make an impact at the most pivotal points in one's life, and to stay connected throughout their journey. We've selected 4 cohorts to focus on: high school students, post-secondary students, middle management and professionals, and finally the next chapter, which we've coined as women entering the workforce or for the first time, or re-entering or just pursuing a new career. Our focus is to curate annual programming, support initiatives, and build partnerships that will provide meaningful value to our cohorts, like mentorship and scholarships. Today, we're grateful to have this opportunity to share preliminary insights on our latest initiative in partnership with Culture IQ, a national research study to understand how to unlock the true potential of South Asian women in the workforce and why this group is vital to Canada's economic future. Holistically, our preliminary research indicates that the face of the Canadian workforce is quickly changing. South Asian women will be integral to its future. We know this by making a note of one of the demographics, specifically the rate of natural increase. The Canadian population is heading towards a net zero birth rate by 2034, coupled with a lagging rate of replacement of retirees, resulting in our national labor replacement rate, resulting in our national labor market to shrink. However, it's quite contrary to what we observed in the South Asian population, which continues to grow and is the single largest visible minority group in Canada. In particular, South Asian female population continues to increase year over year, while the non-visible minority female population has remained basically flat. In addition, the growth is further strengthened with immigration, and we want to highlight international students in particular. We know that Canada has one of the highest rates of international students from South Asia. At the end of 2019, there were over 200,000 students from India just alone. What's important to recognize here is a vast majority of them will remain in Canada to work and gain their Canadian permanent residency. Needless to say, there is a strong presence of South Asians in the workforce. Beyond the shifting of population demographics, South Asian women are among the highest educated, skilled minority group in Canada, underscoring a clear message that they're vital to drive both the overall population growth and national economy. However, it's concerning that there's serious implications ahead of us if we continue to ignore statistics and we do not address the challenges that prevent us from utilizing this highly skilled and untapped workforce. I'd like to now pass it on to my colleague, Jaspreet Sandhu, who will go further into the findings and the positive outcomes.
Good morning. Right now, South Asian women are disproportionately affected by COVID-19, with higher underemployment and unemployment rates. As the economy continues to be hit hard, the unemployment rate swelled to 11.3% in July 2020. However, the national unemployment rate disguises significant variation across population groups. It is important to highlight that the highest figure within the unemployment rate is among South Asian women at 20.4%. What we don't know is why are South Asian women being disproportionately affected. It is also worth noting that prior to COVID-19 pandemic, the unemployment rate still did not favor South Asian women. The 2016 census highlighted the unemployment rate to be 11.14%. Again, this statistic is disproportionately high in comparison to other women. We did not expect to find these alarming statistics. In taking the next steps to examine why this is happening, we may be tempted to jump to certain conclusions. Our preliminary findings lead us to a very confusing picture. What we have learned is that South Asian women are in their prime working years and are highly educated, especially in comparison to other visible and non-visible minorities. To detail this, South Asian women are a decade younger than their counterparts at a median age of 33, and 37% of South Asian women have a university degree, which is the highest in comparison to any other group of women, both visible and non-visible minorities. Anecdotally, through our network of partners, we know that South Asian women in COVID-19 are taking on work that they can get, dealing with possible discriminatory layoffs, having an increase of cases of homelessness, a rise in domestic violence, and are forsaking their careers to take on familial duties. In response to the impacts of COVID, the disproportionate unemployment rate, changing population, Pink Attitude Evolution is focused on collecting better data to produce targeted recommendations and meaningful actions through our national study. Upon completion of the study, Pink Attitude Evolution will initiate a cross-country national outreach plan to ensure South Asian women, employers, educators, and other not-for-profits engage in the findings to positively impact the unemployment rate. Our goal is simple. We will build tangible programs and initiatives to improve the unemployment rate for South Asian women. Our call to action for the Government of Canada can be summarized in 3 simple points. 1, we would like to see the Government of Canada's partnership to support the study. 2, we anticipate a change in policy that is specific in the service of South Asian women, not just general programs for women. 3, we expect COVID-19 recovery plans to seriously consider South Asian women, as they are a well-prepared group of powerful women who can easily fill in gaps of the Canadian economic market. Thank you for your time.
Excellent. And now we go to Gisèle Tassé-Goodman for 5 minutes.
Madame la Présidente, je vous remercie. Mesdames et Messieurs les parlementaires, je me nomme Gisèle Tassé-Goodman, présidente.
I am the chair of FADOC Network. I am accompanied by Mr. Philippe Poiré, advisor in our organization. I would like to thank the members of the committee for inviting me here. FADOC is a grouping of people more than 50 years old in each of our political representations. We want to contribute to improve the living quality of life of seniors. We saw that they were already financially vulnerable before the crisis, and this has worsened. they have to receive only old age pension and the guaranteed income supplement. Let's not forget that a few years back, very often, women had to get out of the labor force to take care of their home duties. Someone receiving only the old age security and the guaranteed income supplement will have an annual income of $19,000. A senior in this situation will hardly obtain the threshold that is set. However, let's not forget that some essential factors are not included when making the calculations, and that the health crisis has increased their expenses. FADOC feels that it's important that the guaranteed income supplement be increased by at least $50 per month per senior. It is also important that the Canadian government implement its electoral promise to increase by 10% the amount for the old age security. FADOC is proposing that the increase be accessible to all seniors who are eligible for the old age security as from 65 years of age. In spite of all these issues, the support provided through the old age security is being weakened. It increases every year depending on inflation, whereas salaries generally increase at a higher pace or rate. Because of these differences, measures have to be taken to replace retirement revenue. Our network is proposing that the federal government index old age security depending on the increase of salaries. Recently, a study carried out by a group in Quebec showed that during the confinement, 9% of those assisting elders had their expenses increase. The increase is about $800 per month, and sometimes it goes up to $6,000. And as we know, women are more vulnerable. Our organization recommends that the money be increased and that tax measures be improved so that there should be refundable tax credits accorded. Now, let me talk about healthcare in Canada. Federal transfers in health increased to in 2016, 2017, whereas the total expenses was $167 billion. The federal proportion accorded to healthcare would reduce to about 20% by 2026. FADOC is therefore recommending that there should be a 6% index rate and that a variable should be included that takes into account the aging of the populations in the provinces and territories. Let's remember that women are mostly the ones working as nurses, and they are the ones who are increasingly suffering from the lack of financial resources in the healthcare sector. I would like to thank members of the committee for listening to us. Thank you very much. We will start with questions and answers. Each person will have 6 minutes for questions, and
We're going to start with Jag Sahota for 6 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here and for your presentation. My question is for Pink Evolution. You guys talked about the unemployment rate being 20+% among the South Asian women, despite the fact they're very educated, have the degrees, and they're much younger. So my question is, how, if at all, is the pandemic-induced economic downturn affecting South Asian women differently than men?
I can take that. And what we're finding is that South Asian women are taking manufacturing jobs or other types of employment to sort of get by, or we're finding people being laid off. I don't have the specific numbers, and that's what we want to dig into.
Okay. the next question is also for you, for Pink Evolution. I heard a lot from my constituents, women of South Asian descent who operated small businesses. But because of the rules surrounding many of the government programs, such as the wage subsidy, that they did not qualify for the programs, particularly at the beginning. The government did end up amending the rules after us conservatives raised these concerns in the House. What has your experience been, and have you heard from South Asian women entrepreneurs that you work with and the challenges COVID has presented and the government's response to that?
Ruby, you can jump in as well, but I will take this again. Again, we're finding it's exactly as you described. We're finding many self-employed business owners struggling. Again, finding alternative work as well. We're also finding people taking on multiple jobs at this time just because they can either lose the income in their households or shutting down their businesses during this period of time and relying on the support of the government where they can. But ultimately, these women want to get back to their businesses, especially since they've built them from the ground up, and they're worried about will they have a business to return to or work to return to. The theme that we generally find is these women will find whatever work that they can get. So they unfortunately will take roles that don't necessarily fit their qualifications. They'll have superior qualifications, but they're very worried about food security, health security, all of those things. So they will, again, find more menial work in other places. And that's also where you're seeing some of the trends of exposure to COVID as well, and infection rates within the community as well, because they're taking other types of work.
Madam Chair, do I still have time? Okay. To elaborate on that, maybe you can talk a bit about how older South Asian women are affected differently by COVID than the younger ones.
I actually don't have a clear sight line into that. What we, again, we want to see through our study is by age, if the education rate sort of shifts by age as well. Are they new immigrants or first generation amongst certain demographics? What we do know is that there are a lot of intergenerational households. And that there is then again added pressure of who is bringing income, and then also who's taking care of the family in terms of just the caregiving work that needs to happen. So I'm sorry I can't give you a statistic around this right now. I really wish I could. But Ruby, did you have any other insights to add here?
No, I think you've nailed it. And I think in terms of like the elderly generation, I think a lot of them from our sort of networks we're finding live in intergenerational families, and so we're still trying to get some data around that so we can kind of specify to you where the sort of the barriers lie, which is again why I think we stress that this national study is really important for us, so that we could not kind of out of blue air come up with like solutions, that we have some tangible stuff that we're looking at, and we can then action that accordingly.
Anecdotally, I'll give you examples. There are many people who have been taking on work that they typically wouldn't have, say in manufacturing or other fields, and are using grandparents, for instance, as daycare, and dropping off their kids, even within sort of the household and the bubbles. And so their exposure risk of senior sort of South Asian women and grandparents and all of that, they're relying on that networked family to support childcare during this time because it's falling to one place or another. That's anecdotally what we think.
Et nous allons, Monsieur Sarré, pour...
Mr. Sarré, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for the information you've provided. It's going to help us as a government to change some of our policies. My first question Maybe for Ms. Delan and Ms. Sadu.
That women have been disproportionately hurt by the pandemic for jobs, and want to assure you that our government has applied the GDP plus lens on budgeting, on a lot of the programs that we've legislation that we've had, and also since March we've also been tweaking some of the changes to our programs to adjust. So I want to thank you for your input. My first question would be the recently we announced the action plan for women in the economy, and so that's a task force that will help, especially on the intersectional component here on the gender lens. So do you have any specific recommendations for that task force moving forward?
Yes, I think when we're looking at the unemployment rates overall, a blanket approach may not be supportive of what's happening. That I think is our message today. So I think we need a little bit more information about what is happening. Is it discriminatory layoffs, for instance, right now? Like the unemployment rate higher for South women, and I think there'll need to be targeted recovery efforts.
Thank you. I know we're having a hard time.
These educated women to get back into and out of.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah.
I understand.
Sorry.
I'll add some time for you.
Thank you. And I also wanted to ask Mr. Lynn, we just recently announced $50 million for Women Entrepreneur. Minister Ng just recently announced this. Do you have any comments or suggestions on specifically how we could gear some of those dollars more on the intersectional lens and gender for women entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I want to echo what Jaspreet had said, that we can't have a blanket approach, and we need to make sure that we understand that this is a substantial group that's, in terms of a population standpoint, but then also from an unemployment standpoint. And I think it could be really easily resolved because this group is highly educated, highly skilled, and they can easily adapt and be marketable instantaneously. And I think it's just somebody taking a lens at looking at them and being able to really, stand behind something that we're doing, like a study, to really give you guys some tangible action that we can help elevate this group forward. And I think if anybody looks at it from a top-down perspective, they're, as Jaspreet had mentioned in her remarks, they're a decade younger than all visible minorities. So they're young, they're highly skilled, they're educated, and so I think that they could really, it's a really easy solution. I just think that we need to make sure we don't do it from a blanket approach with them.
Thank you, and I would appreciate, even after your testimony today, both of you, if you have specific recommendations to send to the clerk and to our chair so that we could inform our report, that would be greatly appreciated. And also I wanted to really thank you on the South Asian international students. My riding of Sudbury, we have over 2,000 international students, and it's so important for our community, for employment and moving forward to attract more international students. Mon autre question, j'ai resté 2 minutes.
I have 2 minutes left for the next question, which goes to Ms. Tassé Goodman. As you know, the Prime Minister met the first ministers to look at the national standards when it comes to long-term care facilities. I don't believe we received a proposal from any of the provinces when it comes to those standards. But if you were to recommend for the provinces, what recommendation would you make to us when it comes to national standards for long-term care facilities? Madam Chair, I would like to answer the question. Just like me, you know that this is a provincial jurisdiction, so we shall not get into that domain. it's not a federal jurisdiction, but would like to invest in health transfers because in that area, we know that there are loopholes. And I would like my colleague, Mr. Poiré-Monet, to say something about that. Good morning. From the data we've received from the conference board, we get developments. Mr. Poiret's sound is not very good. We had some debates in Quebec about the standardization of long-term care facilities, including private ones. But the problem is resources. So we'd like the federal government to invest in that domain. Very well. Madame Larouche, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you. I want to thank the two groups of witnesses. My initial questions will go to Ms. Tassé Goodman or Mr. Poiré-Monet. In your presentation, you said that even before the crisis, the financial situation of seniors had been dropping for a long time and was already precarious. I would like you to talk about the indexation, which you mentioned before, and which compromises the situation of seniors, which was precarious already before the pandemic. Madam Chair, as you know, seniors, particularly women, earn a salary that's less than $20,000 per year. So in 52% of the cases, they earn minimum wage. So it's difficult for them to contribute to the pension fund. So they will not be able to earn a pension from their employers. Let's recall that this government made the commitment to increase by 10% the guaranteed income supplement for people 75 years and older, 65 years and older. This has not been concretized. It was announced in September 2019, and this government mentioned that the increase would go to people 75 years and older. In the speech to the throne in September, the Prime Minister once again mentioned that he was going to go ahead with this commitment. You know, 14 months have gone by since that announcement. Those 75 years and older are getting older. And what we are asking the government is that they move forward with this promise, not only to grant this to those 75 years and older, but also to those 65 years and older. We appeared here in February 2019, and we made the same request. And we also asked that the guaranteed income supplement be increased by $50 per month. And as you know, people living with the guaranteed supplement as well as the old age security have a salary that is below $19,000 per year. That being said, it is very difficult to have access to things like dental care because many of these people do not have the resources to pay for dental expenses, the consultation fees. Same thing for vision care. After consultation, they can't buy glasses, and sometimes they prefer to go to a pharmacy to buy reading glasses. So the seniors can't even afford drugs because at the end of the month, they have to pay for rent. And sometimes they have difficulty paying their bills or buying food. Same thing for hearing devices. In Quebec, there's only one hearing device that is provided to seniors, the basic device. And this is not sufficient, according to specialists, to improve hearing. So there are lots of things I could say. So seniors are deprived of many things, and that is why we are appearing once again before this committee to ask the government to be sensitive to the concerns of the seniors who are having difficulty making ends meet at the end of the month. In 2000, for those 65 years old, income is now indexed. So their income will be reduced. So we want it to be calculated based on salary increases. In 2065, maybe you and I may no longer be on the workforce, or maybe we may not be here anymore. So we as spokespersons for our seniors, we are asking the government to invest strongly in increasing the guaranteed income supplement by $50 and to respect its commitment to increase by 10% the old age security. Thank you, Madam Tasse. If I understand well, that was the situation even before the pandemic. So seniors were asked to isolate during the lockdown. As a result, they were not protected against increases in prices. So how has the pandemic worsened their situation? They have not been spared by inflation, just like everyone else. Everyone has been affected. Madam Chair, as you know, seniors had to isolate, so they were deprived of caregivers, they were deprived of family members, of their neighbors. So they had to isolate at homes, in apartments. They were deprived of various services. So they had to pay from their own pockets for various delivery services, food, taxis to go for appointments in the hospitals, and so on and so forth. So all those expenses were increased because of the pandemic. Of course, caregivers were able to get some assistance to help the seniors during the second wave, but there was an impact on the pockets of seniors and their family members. And that's why we are asking members of the committee to invest and to make sure that these women are not penalized. They ended up alone during the pandemic already. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize. I've just discovered I have a very bad internet connection, so I hope that this works out. I unfortunately have missed some of the testimony, but hopefully I'll stay online. So one of the questions I had, I certainly heard with Pink Attitude that you were talking about a lot of your highly educated members of your community having to unfortunately take jobs that are lower paying, that don't meet their qualifications. And I know within healthcare this is particularly an issue. So I would like to hear about what a lot of your members, or what you've heard from your community that they're suffering in terms of healthcare, and what you think the government can do in terms of, I'm thinking specifically the Color of Poverty had asked, it's an organization, they've been asking for a strengthening of the Federal Employment Equity Act, attaching equity measures through community benefits agreements, and providing for federal investment to those recovery programs, ensuring racialized groups, other underrepresented groups have equitable access to the jobs that they are trained for. And I was wondering if you could address that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent example of tangible action that we can then leverage in the community and promote within the community, so that women actually know to, with the strengthening of the Equity Act, to know that there is some sort of safety or action or a tangible step toward them getting back into their designated fields. I think it also comes to recruitment. I think it also within organizations, acceleration within organizations, and performance review based merit-driven acceleration within organizations. It's one of the partnerships that we're looking to include as part of the study is corporate entities and other not-for-profits, so that corporations are committing to, when they sign on to the study, that they will also have internal policy of how they have been approaching the South Asian women workforce that they might already have, that they may not be tapping into that potential right now, and planning succession plans for them in specific fields and careers, because they may already be in the organization in some cases, and just not on the right career trajectory within the organization. And then, as you mentioned, there are women who are taking part-time or other work who need to be recruited back into those fields, which is a different set of programs altogether. I hope that addressed your question.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you're obviously wanting to undertake quite a lot of like a large project in terms of that data collection. Now we know that disaggregated data is really key to better understanding the measures that we need to take going forward, and we've heard some.
Ms. Matheson, could I ask you to raise your mic a little bit? The interpreters are wondering. Thank you.
Is that better?
I think so.
Okay. It could be because I speak fast, so I apologize. I'll slow it down. Certainly, so you had been talking about, in terms of the projects that you wanted to undertake, the collection of data disaggregated by race, other we certainly heard about all the different socio-demographic identities that need to occur within that collection, and it's about then using it to create these better systems, frameworks. What kind of reporting mechanisms do you see the government using to better improve the collection of data, but also improving the outcomes for racialized communities and your members in your community?
I think it starts, as you mentioned, with desegregated data to look at what populations are being affected where. And again, we found it. We started our study based on a ton of anecdotal information from women saying, I haven't been promoted, or I've been laid off, or I had to shut my business, and we had to aggregate and look at that. And so we first went, what information is out there? And so when we looked at the statistics were there within the July federal report on labor, as well as the 2016 census, but nobody was doing anything related to it. And I don't know if that was an organization like us having to step in to say, we need to do something with this information and it needs to be targeted, or I don't know if it's related to having the analysts look at the information in a different sort of way to say, when we're talking about women overall, we can't talk about women overall. We need to look at community, sort of by community, of what if there's something specific that needs to happen. When we're talking about 20.4%, it's such a high number within the unemployment rate. It's so jarring, right? So it needs. That's where we said, okay, we need something specific. And I know everyone is asking.
I'm sorry, that's your time.
Oh, so sorry.
No problem. We're going to go now to Ms. Wong for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you very much, to all those, all our witnesses presenting your wonderful ideas and your reports. Now, my questions are focusing more on the labor force participation, the workplace consideration, and also the caregiving roles. We have done a lot of studies, so on long-term care. So I'm not going to specifically talk about the formal caregiving. Right now, studies show even before pandemic, for other diseases, a lot of outbreaks of diseases. Primarily, many of the people who are caring are unpaid. For example, you have parents looking after sick kids, you have adult children looking after grandparents and their parents, and their jobs are not paid. Now, during this very very challenging times. One of the presenters did mention that, the worker, the female worker who have to drop their kids to their grandma or their parents to look after that. Now, of course, like for grandparents, they may not be in the workforce, but for those who are also in the workforce and they have to actually do some additional unpaid job. Now, what should we do in order to find out exactly where they are and how we should support them?
I think this comes with what we're talking about here is a child care plan that is effective for working women. And right now, what we have are very competitive daycares. I'm going to tell you personally, I am a working mom. I have a 1-year-old, and my husband is work from home right now. I have nowhere to send my son right now in terms of a daycare because it's highly competitive in the neighborhood that I live. So even the facilities and options that exist are not tangible. So again, to your point, we're relying on our network of family to step in. And I am fortunate enough to have a network of family who can step in. But with COVID, we've restricted households. We've sort of separated those pieces. And what it has meant is, quite frankly, questioning what I am. And I am the perfect case study of pink attitude. Well, what will I do with my career next? Because we can't keep going like this. So does that mean that I'm able to access somebody who is able to come into my home or increase daycare or child support? Or is it paying me for that labor that I have offset with my wage? I'm deciding essentially, do I give a good chunk of my salary over or do I forfeit that payment and do it myself, right? So, and within COVID, it just restricts it all the more. So you have more women forced into that decision.
This is exactly the other concern about productivity. A lot of capable women, like what you just mentioned, have to give up their own pay job in order to look after their sick kids, not only kids, but maybe including their own parents, and not with the long-term care situation, the challenges there. Some adults don't want their parents to stay in long-term care anymore. So in other words, though, you have a sandwich generation which has to bear all these responsibilities. So what should the government do in order to support this very special group of unpaid family caregivers?
I think it's either a type of subsidy or a type of virtual learning or a type of commitment here. But again, we are very reluctant to give you, here is the X, Y, and Z tangible result, because what we want to look at is, are these women who are working in manufacturing, say in the suburbs, or are they like me, office workers in a high level part of their career, to know what the right fit is here? Do they have grandparents in the picture? Do they not have grandparents in the picture? Anecdotally, the South Asian community does not have a high rate of their grandparents in long-term care facilities. They live at home, and it's family members who are taking care of them, and it is extended families that are in the same household or in the same neighborhood that are going from house to house within that thing. Again, that's anecdotally. I wish I could tell you, 60% of the South Asian population operates that way, so then I could say a grandparent subsidy makes sense.
All right.
Well,
And
that
now we're going
applies
to
the Chinese
Miss
community as
Sidhu.
well.
Miss Sidhu then for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for all the witnesses. I would like to highlight the work Ruby and Jaspreet you are doing with Pink Attitude Evolution team. Thank you for the work you're doing. Ms. Dillon, as a Bramptonian, you're aware of how businesses have been deeply affected in our city. As I talk to my residents, particularly those running their businesses, I see how hard they work and how difficult it is for them. Right now, many female businesses owners have to balance running their businesses and supporting families. At the same time, we see more businesses relying on federal programs such as SEBA and the wage subsidy. It is important to see that these programs are evolving as we receive feedback from constituents. For example, business owners with personal bank accounts are now able to apply for SEBA. Would you be able to share with us some examples of women who have been able to adapt to the pandemic challenges affecting their businesses?
Well, I think it anecdotally in terms of our network, we can say that we're hearing that they have support because they're of that intergenerational generation or sandwich generation, as was alluded earlier. And so they have relied on their networks. But with these recent restrictions where the households are sort of put in within one household, it's become increasingly difficult for them if the parents don't live in the same household, which could be not the case. Again, I think to Jaspreet's comments earlier, we're very early on in this research study. We sort of heard a lot of noise from our network, and we wanted to take charge and look at this at a national level. So we've come across to a point of saying 20.4% as the unemployment rate right now, and so we're here to say that we need to pay attention here. We need to do some research here, and we need to be able to come back to you guys, once this is done, to say here are the X, Y, and Z resolutions that we have.
Very quickly, I will also mention many women, female business owners have had to move online very quickly and move their whole model of operation to online shopping where it's relevant, in particular like retail spaces or other types of it has meant scaling up in a different skill set very quickly. So I think the funds that you were describing have helped shift some of those businesses. But obviously not all businesses can function like that. People in healthcare, as we talked about earlier, say chiropractors or sort of other healthcare professionals have been trying to follow sort of the guidelines and restrictions to get a base level patient relationship still going during this time.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Everyone is listening the cracky voice. Can we fix that if we can?
Yes, I've asked the clerk to see what can be done with the technical folks, for sure. You have 1 minute and a half left. You're on mute, Ms. Sidhu.
Oh, thank you. Next question is, Ms. Sandhu, you said you have 1-year-old. That is why government did the Safe Restart program with the provincial government, so they can work with the people like you to support you. And your organization recently announced it was launching a research study on unlocking the potential of a growing South Asian women labor force. At the same time, the Prime Minister announced an additional 1.5 billion investment through the Workforce Development Agreement. Do you have recommendations to ensure that this investment reaches Canadian in sectors that have been hardest hit by the pandemic and those in underrepresented groups get the support they need?
Yes, proportionately distribute those funds based on the unemployment rate amongst women. I think that's one of the easiest ways to know that we're actually reaching the women who have been most impacted. Thank you.
My next question is, again, I often hear from my residents, my youth council, many Brampton organizations about the importance of reliable mental health services available to our youth, particularly of women and girls. Back in May, CMHA Peel Dufferin reported 40% of youth said they felt the mental health had deteriorated since the pandemic began. Can you explain how you think, what is the take on the impact of the pandemic on our youth mental health?
Unfortunately, you're out of time. We go now to Madame Larouche, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to continue with Mr. Segoodman concerning women who are seniors and seniors in general. We've talked a lot about people who ended up in long-term care facilities during the pandemic. But I would like to learn more about many more seniors who are at home and want to remain at home. Should we develop home care? I know that we heard in the media that many more people want more support to remain at home. So maybe federal transfers could also help the provinces like Quebec to keep seniors at home, at least those who want to remain at home. Madam Chair, clearly last week we went in the news. There was an announcement from the Quebec government to provide 100 million. That's good, but we still need a lot more. We need to invest more, and we are counting on the Canadian health transfers for that. Seniors, and most seniors, are living at home in their own houses, in their own neighborhoods. They are close to their family members. So they would like to continue living that way. So it's important to provide home care services for such seniors. And the Canadian health transfers will definitely help them more. We know that it's not the norm. When seniors end up in long-term care facilities, sometimes it's not their choice. They have made the choice to, some of them have made the choice to remain at home and in their neighborhoods. So to summarize, to help seniors overcome a future pandemic or crisis, we need to, first of all, increase their purchasing power so that they can stay at home, and also try to resolve inequalities that exist for female seniors. Sometimes they end up being widows and have not had the time to accumulate enough savings. So you think the conditions of female seniors need to be improved so that they can have more money to contribute to the economic recovery? That's the end of your time.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for the FEDOC group, I would like to know, we've talked a lot about seniors having to take on their own internal family caregiving issues, or they have to take on caregiving of a loved one. They rely a lot upon family members internally, and of course, this is mainly by women. The NDP has called for the implementation of a refundable Canada Caregiver Tax Credit. Is that something that you support, your group supports?
Alors, vous savez que les...
You know that in many cases, women are the ones who are caregivers, taking care of their parents, family members. Sometimes the neighbors are the ones who go do groceries, do the cleaning, and taking care of the daily needs like food preparation. So in many cases, caregivers are the ones who are sometimes working part-time. As I said, they are earning less than $20,000 a year, and that's not enough to meet their needs. They also have to limit their working hours. We are also recommending that tax credits for caregivers should be refundable tax credits, because right now, caregivers earning a salary that is low don't pay any tax. So we are asking the government to reconsider these tax credits so that they become refundable.
So one of the promises by the Liberal government was to increase OAS at the age of 75. However, you specifically were talking about wanting to increase senior supports at the age of 65. What is that 10-year difference? What does that mean to your members?
Ben, écoutez,
to avoid desegregation, why would someone 75 and older would receive it and someone 65 and older would not receive the 10% increase in the old age security? In many cases, it's women who are living with a low salary or low income, so to speak. I said it a while ago. Seniors have been waiting for this promise to be fulfilled for 14 months. And that promise was once again repeated during the throne speech in September. Seniors have a hard time believing that this government will fulfill that promise of increasing OA security by 10%. And they are wondering when that promise will be fulfilled. Why not make it available to those 65 and older? Because in many cases, these people also have difficulty making ends meet at the end of the month. For various reasons, grocery prices have increased, so it's very difficult for seniors to meet their needs.
I think what we'll do is we'll have a quick question from Ms. Sahota and then a quick question from Mrs. Dillon. Ms. Sahota.
So my question's for Pink Revolution. You talked about South Asian women being a vital group, that any programs and recovery programs and policies post-COVID needs to focus on them as well. What are some of your recommendations for that post-19 recovery programs and policies?
Some of the things that can everyone hear me properly? Okay. Some of the things that we have been thinking about, but we want to make sure measure against fact, include recruitment efforts, accelerator programs within the companies themselves, educational programs for or outreach programs for students leaving university and high school. So either from high school directing them into specific programs or from university into particular fields of recruitment. I think as well from this discussion, we're looking at partners related to childcare, senior relations, mental health networks as well within the community. So when we're talking about what we need to do to remove barriers, essentially. What are the reasons that these women are not in the workforce, and addressing it from taking it essentially point by point from there.
Okay, and final comment or question to MP Dillon.
Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. My question is for Ms. Sandhu and Ms. Dillon. It's regarding what you mentioned before, the fact that South Asian women are very at a high rate of unemployment. And this was pre-pandemic. For me, I think it's important also to get to the root causes of such statistics. What the pandemic has done, it's really just emphasized, I guess, what's wrong in society. Can you please explain to us why you think the rates of unemployment are so high, and whether you think racism and other factors of intersectionality are contributing to this rate of unemployment? And maybe I won't have time to finish asking questions. If you can please tell us, God forbid, but there might be, a third wave or any other such pandemic in the future, how can the government of Canada better prepare and help organizations such as yourselves? Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I think that's where our study started, because so many working professionals, white collar women, South Asian women were finding that they were not getting promoted or being held back in certain positions, being asked to do all of the work but not get the title or the salary related to it. That is one of the most consistent stories that we hear. I'll also share that's been my personal experience as well, has been great, you can do the work, you're great, Jaspreet, take on this portfolio. Oh, we'll talk about the title later when I ask about the title or the money, quite frankly, or the salary that goes along with that. So I think that's what started our interest in digging a little bit further. And then with the pandemic, as you mentioned, it just has exacerbated it. And that's why we also are asking, have the companies, organizations have had to make hard decisions about layoffs. And but in that layoff, has there been maybe an unconscious bias as part of it? Has there been something structural as part of it? And that's why we need to partner with those companies to have their commitment. And those companies so far have been very willing and very open to say, we'll support the study and we will figure out and commit to change within our organization as well.
Very good.
Thank you.
Listen, that's our time for this panel. I want to thank the witnesses for being just excellent. And we're going to switch gears right now, and we're going to start our second panel. We are very fortunate to have with us from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, Corinne Pullman, who's the Senior VP, National Affairs and Partnerships. And we have from FEMISOR, Séverine Labelle, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer. We'll have them make their 5 minutes of comments each and then begin our rounds of questions. So we'll start with you, Corinne, for 5 minutes.
There, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Great. All right. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'll be focusing my remarks on the impacts of COVID-19 on female entrepreneurs, and I'll be walking you through a slide deck that I hope you all have in front of you. So right away, I want to talk a little bit about CFIB. It's a not-for-profit, member-based organization that represents the interests of independently owned Canadian companies. Our 110,000 members come from every sector of the economy and are found in every region of the country. During COVID-19, CFIB has been very active as our helpline call volumes tripled, with small business owners looking for information to help them get through the crisis. We've also undertaken regular surveys since the beginning of the pandemic to determine how small businesses are doing and how well government programs are working. And I want to share some of that with you today. So if we move to slide 3, I wanted to start with how small businesses are doing right now. As of early November, 66% of small businesses were fully open, 42% were fully staffed, and only 28% were at normal sales, all of which has actually decreased since October as more jurisdictions impose further restrictions. Bottom line is this pandemic remains a significant challenge for many small businesses. Now, small businesses are not homogenous, as you can see on slide 4. About 30% have been in business for 10 years or less, and 96% have fewer than 50 employees. Just under 1 in 2 small business owners are owned by men, almost 1 in 4 are owned by women, and 28% have multiple owners, which may have a combination of genders. Slide 5 looks at the share of ownership by gender, with 23% of firms being either entirely or majority owned by women, and another 28% owned equally by women and men. This means that around 50% of business owners have women playing some type of role in the ownership. Now, female business owners are also more highly represented in certain sectors such as social services, enterprise and administration management, retail, professional services, and personal services. In addition, as you can see on slide 6, women-owned businesses also tend to be newer and smaller than their male counterparts, which may also explain some of the additional challenges that they have faced. And those challenges are substantial, as you can see on slide 7. Only 63% of female-owned businesses are fully open, which is 10% less than male-owned businesses. 35% are fully staffed, which is 13% less than their male counterparts, and only 24% are back to normal sales, which is 8% less than men-owned businesses. As you can see on slide 8, most small businesses are worried about the uncertainty around a second wave, and about 2/3 worry about the economic repercussions. About half are worried that consumer spending will be reduced even after COVID, and a similar amount are worried about their business cash flow, the physical health impacts, and their growing debt. When we dissect this data further, you will see on slide 9 that female-owned businesses are much more likely to be worried about consumer spending being reduced even after COVID, about their mounting debt, about their business cash flow, and about dealing with overwhelming stress than their male counterparts. So clearly, female entrepreneurs could use some financial and emotional support. When it comes to financial support, as you can see on slide 10, female-owned businesses are more likely to need rent relief, and getting that relief significantly increases their odds of staying open. This is why the new Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy needs to be implemented as soon as possible. As you can see at slide 11, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy tends to be more heavily used by more established firms. As female-owned businesses are more likely to be newer and smaller, we can assume they're probably not using the wage subsidy quite as much, and they're more likely to have used the Canada Emergency Response Benefit to help themselves get through the tougher periods of the pandemic. And it was also sometimes the only financial support many very small and newer business owners could get. So, in summary, before I get to some recommendations, female-owned business owners are more likely to be smaller and newer, which also tends to be the businesses that are more likely to fall through the cracks of the various emergency relief programs. So it really should be no surprise. They also tend to be more worried about their businesses, and with good reason. The data tells us that they're less likely to be fully open, have normal or better revenues, be fully staffed, and able to pay their rent. So to help these entrepreneurs weather the storm, we need to make adjustments to the various emergency relief programs. First, we need to expand all emergency support programs to include micro-sized and newer firms, as this will likely help more female-owned businesses, and it might end also those that are owned by visible minorities. For example, the Canada Emergency Business Account Loan requires a smaller company with less than $20,000 in payroll to submit documents showing they have more than $40,000 in non-deferrable expenses. Problem is, the application process is complex and some of the rules make it very difficult to comply. It needs to be simplified and made more flexible. Second, as rent tends to be a more important expense to female-owned businesses, governments need to introduce the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy immediately, as the 1st of December is not that far away. It would also be important for government to look at providing 50% of rent retroactively to those who qualified under the old rent program but not get it as their landlord did not apply. Those businesses have likely accumulated a lot of debt and deserve to be provided with some assistance to help them through this. Third, even though women entrepreneurs are less likely to use the wage subsidy, it is still the most generous program being offered to small businesses. So we want to make sure it is accessible to those that really need it. For example, many small business owners pay themselves in dividends, and so they're not able to include their own income in the wage subsidy, nor can they use their dividend income to get CEBA. These programs should allow at least some dividend income to be included. We would also suggest that the new lockdown support, which allows businesses to get up to 90% of their rent covered if they are forced to shut down due to public health order, be expanded to the wage subsidy. Businesses want to hold on to their staff, but if they must close, they may not have no choice but to let them go. Increasing the wage subsidy to 90% during these periods may help many more hang on to their staff until they can open. And finally, I just want to mention something about seasonal businesses that are starting to emerge and that they're now in their low season and may no longer have the revenue losses they did during the summer, but their needs have not changed. And without having made their usual higher revenues during the high season, it'll be difficult for many of them to get through to next year. Finding some alternative ways for them to illustrate their circumstances in order to get a higher wage subsidy would be welcome. There are many more ideas, but I would leave it to that for today. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Excellent, thank you. And now we're going to go to Séverine Labelle. 5 minutes.
Bonjour.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for receiving me. A few words about FEMISOR. It's a Quebec organization that works to develop female entrepreneurship in Quebec. For 25 years, we've been providing financing and assistance to female entrepreneurs from all regions of Quebec. To develop the potential of the Canadian economy, we need to promote diversified and inclusive economic growth. Unfortunately, female-owned businesses are still mostly the minority in Canada. Only 15.5% of SMEs are majority family-owned, compared to 66.4% that are majority male-owned. When you look at statistics, this disparity is increasing. In the manufacturing sector, the technology sector, and the innovative sectors, women are largely absent. Female entrepreneurship experienced remarkable growth in recent years. Entrepreneurship intentions tripled between 2007 and 2019, and is even higher amongst immigrant women. But COVID-19 has hit women entrepreneurs harder, which threatens to widen the gender gap. And this is what we learned through a survey conducted by FEMISOR in collaboration with the BMO Chair in Diversity and Governance at the University of Montreal and the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge. The findings in this report are worrisome and require additional measures to make sure that entrepreneurs can participate fully in the economic recovery. Some of the highlights of this study: women entrepreneurs were hard hit by COVID-19. 2/3 of the companies surveyed were operating at less than 50% capacity during the crisis in the spring. 1 in 5 women entrepreneurs did not think they could survive the crisis. Furthermore, women-owned businesses have distinctive characteristics. They are in sectors that are most affected by the crisis. For example, retail, customer service, culture, arts, restaurant services, all sectors that clearly have been most affected by the crisis. And companies owned by women are usually smaller and therefore have fewer financial resources to face such a crisis. Women-owned businesses have financial problems. As my colleague said, 42% of the women entrepreneurs surveyed indicated that were actively seeking funding to ensure their survival or to adapt their services or products in response to the pandemic after exhausting the government assistance that was available to them. Their funding requirements averaged $54,000. However, only 20% of these women said that they intended to take advantage of the measures put in place by the government of Quebec or the government of Canada. And when asked why, many said they did not qualify for the programs. The high rate of the indebtedness of women is another important factor in this study. Measures implemented by the government, or rather in spring, these services have been used, but it's mostly the PACME program and the salary subsidy. The crisis also had a negative impact on women. They have more family responsibilities. They are experiencing more stress as well because they have difficulty making sure that there's a good family life balance. Through the survey, we also realized that women need training and coaching to help them go digital and to support them in innovation, business development, and networking. So what needs to be done? First of all, I think that we need to do more to make sure that women are fully engaged in the economic recovery and that we do not lose the hard-fought-won gains of the past 10 years. So the gendered crisis requires a gendered response. The economic recovery plan must include specific actions to revive the sectors that employ the most women. Women entrepreneurs can play a leading role in creating a resilient economy, not only because of the role that they play in providing essential services to our population, but also because of their role in creating strong and diverse local economies. Women entrepreneurs can be a driving force in creating a sustainable and green economy. According to a major Canada-wide study, Canadian women are more committed to taking action on climate change than men. We need to increase support for women entrepreneurs and leverage that expertise of partners in the entrepreneurial ecosystem so that no business is left behind, so that we can generate the expected sustainable prosperity. Examples of actions and support measures for women: first of all, financing, coaching that is personalized and customized. For example, we do have such a measure that has helped us provide help to more than 80% of our companies. Consulting services as well that take into account specific models that could help women. I would like to commend the leadership of the Canadian government in favor of women entrepreneurship. FEMASOR would like to thank the government for the trust it granted it by giving it the greatest grant given to an organization involved in women entrepreneurship. The support was even enhanced during COVID to help hundreds of women entrepreneurs so that they could tailor their needs, the needs of their businesses to their specific targets. The various funding measures dedicated to entrepreneurs should also go through organizations like FEMASOR so that we make sure that women have access to this financial assistance so that they can benefit from the assistance we provide. In conclusion, when we look at the economy, women participate a lot and contribute a lot to the GDP. And this represents an increase of the GDP in the next 10 years. And a new financial service sector could be added. So to conclude, It is more important than ever for diversity and inclusion to be considered levers for economic growth, innovation, and social development. Clearly, sustainable development and economic development of Canada depends on greater participation of women and underrepresented communities who need to be supported so they can contribute to their full potential. Thank you very much.
For 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'd like to thank all the witnesses that are here today. I so appreciate you presenting your statistics and recommendations. We understand that based on your statistics and our own personal observations that women are very important to the business sector and are a major influence in our economy, local economies and the job market. So it is very important that we're having the discussion right now. I'm looking at the slide show with the statistics on the recommendations for small businesses most impacted by the pandemic regarding CEBA, the rent subsidy, and the wage subsidy. Is there any statistic or data, or do you have any rough estimates, Corinne, on how many who have actually tragically had to close shop where these kinds of benefits might have saved them? Because what's helpful to us as those who will be going to the table to discuss these benefits is to sense the urgency and what the needs were, where we could focus our attention, steer our attention. Could you speak into that?
Well, I don't have data specifically for women entrepreneurs, but I do have data more generally in regards to the impact of the pandemic. We have estimated, and we're starting to update that data right now. This is back from July, and we're going to be updating it again in a couple of weeks, that between probably 150 and 220,000 businesses will likely close as a result of the pandemic. But also in regards to that, we also have been told, like through our surveys, that about 56% of our members are uncertain that they can survive a second wave. So if they're forced to shut down a second time, there is a good proportion of them that can't. Where we're hearing the biggest issues is probably among the newer businesses, because there is no real assistance for them, and among those smaller businesses, both of which tend to be more highly represented among female entrepreneurs. And so those are the two, as I mentioned, where we see the biggest gaps still, and where they're still struggling, I think, the most in regards to trying to get through this, especially if there is a second lockdown or they're in a jurisdiction where that is happening. It's pretty grim, unfortunately. We also don't have data on how many have already closed. So that's the other part of this that is unknown at this point, because I think there's a lot of, as my colleague would say, zombie businesses right now that are probably looking like they're still around on paper, but they're probably pretty much shutting down the business behind the scenes. So it's unfortunately difficult at this time, but I would say the target really, if we're going to help, is going to be that newer, smaller businesses, which is really where a lot of women find themselves.
Great, thank you. I like what I'm hearing about helping women sit down and receive consultation and retool their businesses and revamp their operations to adapt to this COVID environment. And I know that Ms. LaBelle has already mentioned some things, but beyond consultation, what are some tools or programs that would be helpful for women to have this, to retool, to repivot in a short time, because we know that time is of the essence in this climate? That's for both witnesses.
So I would say that first and foremost, it's about getting them through this current issue or the current pandemic, and that is essentially making adjustments to some of the COVID relief programs is going to be important in order for them to make it through, because first you have to deal with your immediate issues, and then you need to sort of look at what you can do. Now, so that's usually financial support of some kind, whether it's business cash flow or dealing with your debt. In terms of pivoting, certainly some businesses are able to go online, and we've seen a huge transition, and we've been doing what we can also as an organization to sort of help them get the training that they need in order to adjust their businesses to a more digital space. And I think that continues to be an important avenue for a lot of businesses, but not every business is able to do that. So those are the groups that we have to think about a little bit more as well. And so, but I do want to say that I'm constantly amazed at the ingenuity and creativity of so many small business owners through this pandemic and what they're doing to try to maintain their business survival. And I think there's some incredibly good stories out there to share, regardless of gender, but among many businesses that I've spoken to who've been able to adapt in many different ways. Is there a single bullet or silver bullet to this? No, unfortunately, I don't think there is. But I think providing them with the financial support to get through this tough period is the place to start. Thank
you. Is there, Ms. LaBelle, did you want to comment on that?
That's pretty much your time.
Oh, sorry.
We'll go now to Goody Hutchings for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Look, thanks to you both for being here today. Wonderful to see you, and thanks for your passion and what you do, and especially in these crazy times. I think we all agree that COVID has certainly turned the world upside down. Ms. LaBelle, it's great to see your organization because you can truly talk about the women's entrepreneurship strategy, and I'm sure you know that the $15 million was added to that. You know, the basis of the strategy is entrepreneurship, the fund itself, ecosystem fund, knowledge, and of course the hub expert panel. And that was started long before the pandemic. So the increase of the $50 million, I hope, is really going to help organizations like yours and others continue to do some more work, some great work. Ms. Pullman, you made some great comments, and I'm from a very large rural riding, and my colleague, MP Shin, was going down the line that I was, you know, like what have we done and where are the success stories of those small businesses and entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs that have turned the corner and doing some great work. You know, a lot of it is changing their product on the fly. I'd like your comment on your thoughts on how we can encourage more businesses to regroup, refocus, and look at the new normal that we're coming to. I think we all agree there will be a new normal. And I'd also like your comment on the impact of rural small businesses operated by women. I too, in my riding, have many, many seasonal businesses. So I'd love your thoughts on the impact on rural seasonal businesses and how can we help women in all our programs that have been out. The one that to me has helped most of the people that have fallen through the cracks is the RRF, the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. That has helped so many people in my riding. So I'd like your comments on rural businesses, how we help women businesses retool and regroup in this new norm.
Okay, so so I think first and foremost, when it comes to the more rural businesses, this pandemic, I'm going to start by saying, has hit everybody very hard. In the rural ridings, our rural areas of the country, I think it's been slightly less of an issue, only because I think that the small businesses in those communities are more well known, and individuals do try to do what they can to help them in a bigger way than you'll find in some very large urban environments, which are completely decimated and ghost towns now. Having said that, there's no doubt that it's still equally tough in the more rural areas. I think the issues are similar, though, in that it's, again, going back to the need for financial assistance now. I think some of the recent announcements around the change in, for example, the CAN Export program to allow folks to not only get funding for export opportunities, but also get funding to help you go more digital. So to build a website, to be able to get involved in virtual summits. I think those are good things that we're trying to push out to our members to make them aware of so that they have options. Because I think sometimes what's keeping some businesses from pivoting to another area is the cost associated with it. When you're already feeling like you're so much in debt and your business cash flow is basically nil, pivoting to something new sometimes takes an investment that you just don't have. So making sure that there's things like programs out there that can help them figure out how to do that, but that can help them also fund that, I think will be very important. I do want to make one final comment on the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. I think it has worked well in some circumstances and not well in others. For example, it was meant to sort of provide opportunities for those businesses falling through the cracks of the general support programs, and some of them don't do that. So I think there is some retooling there that could help. And I know that it has helped quite a number in the rural regions, which is great, especially the Development Corporation grants. Those have worked super well. But they were supposed to provide, for example, help to sole proprietors and those really micro-sized firms. And we've been hearing that they haven't necessarily been able to do that as effectively as we had hoped. So that's my final comment.
I think you're true there that each region may be doing things differently, because I know that's been a huge help here in mine. And I was really excited we announced the Universal Broadband Fund and the Rapid Relief Stream. I think that's really going to target the areas where we're going to see high-speed internet get into these small communities that can help people retool and get online. I know one thing I keep trying to preach all the time is as businesses are impacted and affected, that shop local, buy local, support local, even if it is online. Madame Labelle, a quick question for you. What are some of your key recommendations to ensure that women return to work? What are the key things we need to address? We always talk about childcare. What other ones do we need to address to ensure we do get women back in the workforce quickly?
En fait, moi, la question qui m'intéresse, c'est comme...
I would like to know what we could do to revitalize women entrepreneurship, because we don't see new businesses being created by women. I'm sure that the crisis would lead to the disappearance of some businesses. So if we were to add to that the fact that few businesses are being created, this will create more problems. So women may not want to get into that business because of their responsibilities at home, the difficulties they face. So the gender gap will continue to widen. So there are a number of things we could do. First of all, make sure that they are supported financially when they have an idea to get into business, and revive the entrepreneurship on the ground to make sure that new businesses are being created. Maybe should be part of an economic plan. We need to find out how we make sure that we include sectors that are of interest to women. We shouldn't simply think about economic recovery in terms of infrastructure development and all that, but we need to think about other sectors where women are likely to invest. Something else we see on the ground is that there are opportunities when it comes to acquiring businesses. Some businesses are not faring well right now. Some entrepreneurs saw the crisis as the last drop that broke the camel's back, and I decided the last straw that broke the camel's back, and I decided to sell off their businesses. So women want to buy some of these businesses. So there's a drastic increase in the number of women entrepreneurs who are buying new businesses. So I think we have here a great opportunity to revive the economy with women buying more businesses. So we need to provide them with the right coaching. Thank you. We have Madame Larouche now for 6 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you. I want to thank the two witnesses. It's always very interesting to hear people talk about business women, women entrepreneurs. It's always stimulating. But we realize that the challenges are many. The challenges were there for them even before the pandemic. Let me clarify something with you, Madame Labelle. Could you tell us more about this? Because in Quebec, SMEs are part of our economic model. It's an important part of our business. 15.5% of SMEs are owned by women compared to 66.4% owned by men. Why are there so few women business owners, whereas this model is exceptional for the economy? That's a good question. We don't always have the right answer for that question. But we need to understand that, yes, the percentage is low, but it's increasing. Women are 3 times higher in business now than before. So women-owned businesses increased by 50% over the past few years. Now, why are they such few that are owned 100% by women when compared to those owned 100% by men? Is it a lack of a model? When we think of going into business, the first model we think about is we think of men. They are usually the models that exist, white men. And sometimes women do not identify with such models. They don't find their own values in those models. Another crucial element, that's one crucial element. Another one is that for a long time, women encountered lots of obstacles when they tried to get into business. The first, it's one we've heard all over the world, and it's the same thing in Canada, access to funding. When people want to start a business, 50% of women have difficulty securing funding when they want to start a business. But there's so much capital on the market, so why are we having these problems? There's a lot of capital, but mostly for growing businesses and businesses involved in sectors that are considered excellent sectors. But as we said before, women get involved in businesses in higher risk sectors. Retail, for example, women are very present, and these are sectors that are very difficult to secure funding in. Something else, there are gender issues. Lots of studies have shown that for the same project, with exactly the same elements, all you have to do is change the name. When it's a woman, her chances of receiving funding are less. So there are gender issues that persist over time. So we must resolve those systemic obstacles if we really want to change the statistics. The 15.5% of businesses owned 100% by women in Canada. Imagine what our economy would look like if men and women were entrepreneurs at the same level. In Quebec, there are tens of thousands of additional businesses that could be created if there were more female businesses. So it is essential for us to take care of that. Yeah, because of the figures, we can dream of what could happen. But during the pandemic, well, luckily, there were some programs that may have been ill-suited for women. I would like to know what you think. Let's look at the emergency account, for example. Why could these measures not help women? What could have been done to improve those programs to help the women survive the crisis? 42% of female entrepreneurs are looking for funding, and only 20% of them intend to use the government programs, like the emergency fund. I don't want to come back to explanations that have already been provided before. That has to do with the size of the businesses, startups, and so on. They have more difficulty. To that, let me add the choice made by the government, which may have been wise in a context where the government wanted to reach the most people. It's all nice and good, but we know that many female entrepreneurs do not have a business account in the business institutions, in financial institutions. Some have had unfortunate experiences with financial institutions, and some have been discouraged because of the red tape associated with funding requests. My recommendation would be that organizations like FEWO, but there are many other organizations, these organizations should be the ones offer such funding with the same conditions. We have the tools to be able to provide funding. So we could have taken part of that package to send it to organizations like us that work directly with women. That way, we would have been able to provide the funding to them at the same time while doing coaching. These are things that financial institutions do not do.
For 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I know that this was mentioned briefly in the witness testimony, but I would like to go back. We've certainly heard about the provision of childcare and a national system of childcare, how that would consistently help women across the board, whether they're working or they are women entrepreneurs. So, but for specifically entrepreneurs, I know you've also talked about the great deal of stress that they've had. We've heard about the stress of running a business, absolutely, but also juxtaposing that with the stresses of the family and caregiving, both for children, but and also elderly family members, and that falling specifically on women. So I'd like to hear from both of you about how the provision of a national affordable universal childcare program could help those women who run those businesses so that they had the stability of that program.
Est-ce que votre question m'est Au Québec, on a un système de garde universel et je dois dire que quand ça a été
In Quebec, we have a universal childcare program.
que c'est une mesure absolument.
Yes, if it doesn't exist elsewhere in Canada, it is absolutely.
It is a critical measure. It's something we've seen in Quebec. We have this universal system.
And I guess I'll respond quickly to something. Childcare is always going to be an issue, I think, for female entrepreneurs, and something that we also saw in greater degree during the pandemic, given that kids were also out of school at the beginning of this, and that really, I think, highlighted a bit of that. Whether a universal, I know you said affordable, and that's an important part of this, is part of a mandate going forward. It would be something we would have to sort of check with our own female entrepreneur members and see how they think about it. I think having something that's obviously affordable and they're able to put their kids into those programs would certainly help. I will also mention, though, that a lot of women entrepreneurs go into this line of business because they want to be able to have to stay at home with the kids, and that sometimes the ability to do that by running their own business is there as well. So I think there's sort of two sides to that, but at the same time, I think it's something that I think we certainly have to look at, and I think that was really brought home at the beginning of the pandemic in terms of the kids not being in school and what it meant for a lot of individuals and women who had to then deal with that and balance not just their jobs or their businesses along with their childcare.
Yeah, I know I spoke with quite a few women on Zoom calls who you know, you could hear the kids in the background, and that certainly did impact their ability to manage and cope. I also, in terms of the idea of those supports that the government can provide, we know that if you were to provide a national pharmacare program, it could save employers $600 per employee, because the government at a more affordable cost could provide the coverage that normally is provided if employees are lucky, and if employers can also afford to do so, provide those benefits. So in terms of a national pharmacare program and national dental care program, those savings could certainly have a great deal of impact for your members, if you could speak to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, pharmacare is interesting because a lot of small business owners themselves don't have coverage for themselves, right? I mean, they because they can't afford it or whatever reasons, even, you know, they'd like to offer it to their employees, but when you're micro-sized, it can be very difficult to find healthcare pharmacare coverage. So our members are actually quite mixed on it. I think that there's actually more support for having something. The reason it's mixed is understanding how it will be paid for, right? I think that's the piece that is the big unknown question. I think the concept and the principle of it is something that is supported by many small business owners because they themselves would like to have greater access to pharmacare type of drugs or whatever the case might be. But the thing that holds them back is understanding how it's going to be paid for, because there have been proposals in the past where it could be things like a payroll tax, or it could be, obviously other ways that it gets paid for. So that's the piece that I think sort of is the one missing piece of the puzzle that we would need to know before figuring out exactly how they feel around a whole pharmacare program.
And Madame Labelle? J'ai pas malheureusement d'informations à vous remettre par rapport à ce point en particulier. Par contre, je pense que ce qu'il faut, ce à quoi
I have no information on this, but what we have to think about is to help self-employed women. They're entrepreneurs, but they fall between the cracks because they can't get, for example, unemployment insurance. And thankfully, during the pandemic, they could avail themselves of CERB, but in general, they don't have access to such programs such as pharmacare. So we have to look at it more broadly to see how we could better support self-employed women, because very often they decide to start their own business. I would finish with a statistic. Almost 50% of women's businesses are individual business. So it's a great number of female-owned businesses who would need such programs.
And Ms. Wong for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and it's been a very informative morning. I'm in British Columbia, so that's still in the morning. So my questions are around some business women I talked to, and also through my experiences as a former female entrepreneur myself, and also as a trainer for entrepreneurs. And I was the founding vice president of the BC Enterprise Society for Women, which did the financing as well as the training, exactly what CFIB have been promoting, that these small business owners, especially women, need both the money and and also the training. Now, my question is about some of the programs which have been around. Now, I have a friend who runs a boutique in an Asian mall, and obviously because of COVID, she had to close her business for some time, and following the rules. And then when she reopened, she found it so difficult to pay for the rent, and at that time she was not allowed to apply for it, and obviously the owner still does not want to apply for the subsidy because of the 25% reduction of the rent. Now, so it was through our party that we fight for them, and then finally now the rent subsidy now can be applied by the small business owners, including women. So from that perspective, what do you think needs to be done even more, in order to help these small business women?
I'll start, and I think the most important thing on the rent subsidy is to get it out. It's still not available. We understand it's still going through the Senate this week, and hopefully once it gets passed, hopefully this week, it will be quickly launched thereafter. December 1st is coming. And as you mentioned, there are many small business owners like the women you're talking about who had landlords that didn't apply for it, even though they were eligible. And we believe it's important for government to consider those businesses. So all those businesses that haven't been able to pay their rent for the last 6-8 months weren't able to get help from their landlord. We believe that there should be something retroactive for them, right? To allow them to build, because one of the biggest issues women entrepreneurs are telling us that they're worried about is debt. And that debt is accumulating, whether it's been deferred or put aside, or they've had to find other ways to pay it. we believe there should be something at least provided retroactively to all those business owners that were not able to access the old rent subsidy program, but were eligible under those rules that were there then. So that's one thing I think that can be done for sure. I also think that the Canada Emergency Business Account loans needs to be simplified for those businesses that are very small. Because right now it is very complex. So I think that would be another big one that needs to be looked at very closely.
Yeah, I heard the same challenges when I asked my hairdresser, how come you're not getting any help? He said it's too complicated. I mean, instead of spending hours filling that form, I better get some more business done. So that's exactly what's been happening to these women owners, business owners. Now, another challenge, have been home-based businesses, which we haven't talked about, and because of COVID, many of these small business, especially for women, they move their business home. Now, what kind of support should there be for these home-based businesses, especially for women entrepreneurs?
Well, again, I would argue it's one of the questions we have outstanding with the government right now is whether the rent subsidy will apply at least partially to home-based businesses, much like you can deduct expenses for home-based businesses from your income taxes. Is there a way that we can also have part of the rent subsidy help with that? And certainly, again, because they're home-based businesses, they may be sole proprietors, access to many of the other subsidy programs is limited. And that's where we thought the regional relief and recovery funds might help, but many of them don't offer help to the sole proprietors when they maybe should have. And so I think those are some of the areas that are still, as I mentioned, gaps in the systems. And I believe home-based businesses are one of those gaps that we have to think about.
And for women entrepreneurs, they have always been the balance between family business, and so what sort of support should the government be giving to these women who have to handle both?
Yeah, yeah.
A big question.
It is a big question, and it's a tough one to answer in regards to everything. Like I said, I mean, if the biggest worries for women entrepreneurs are debt, business cash flow, stress, and that they're worried their consumers will not come back. And so finding ways to sort of start to address those and recognizing that the programs that currently exist just need to be expanded to include a broader array of business owners, because I do think the government has learned a lot in this process about all the different types of businesses that exist out there and the different formats that they come in. And if we want to encourage entrepreneurship among women and among younger people, we need to make sure that we're recognizing these as legitimate businesses and being able to include them within many of the programs that already exist.
All right, and that's your time. We're going now to Ms. Zahid for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for a very informative session today. My question to both the witnesses, to Ms. Labelle and Ms. Pullman is, we all know that in order for Canada and its economy to develop sustainably, more women and especially underrepresented communities must be involved in entrepreneurship and must contribute to their full potential. I represent a riding which has been called as home by people from all parts of the world. And I see and talk to women entrepreneurs who are from underrepresented communities, minority women, new immigrants. And we all know that this pandemic has added more responsibility and stress, more responsibility on the shoulders of the women, because if the kids are not going to school, they have to take care, make sure that they are looked after. Even if they are doing online classes, they have to, in case of younger kids, they have to supervise. And many new immigrant families are 3-generational families. We have seen that if I see women from South Asian communities in my writing, they have their parents also at home. So as things have been very difficult for our seniors, it's an added responsibility for the women to look after their parents also. So do you have any recommendations how we can help this group of women entrepreneurs? And if there is any data
that how this pandemic has adversely affected them. So I would like to hear from both of you if you would give some recommendations. So as we now try to build back more resilient Canada where everyone is included, that how and what we can do to help those underrepresented women also. So I will start with Ms. Fallman, if you have any suggestions, and then go to Ms. Labal.
Sure, thank you for the question. So I really don't mean to be repetitive, but the scope of this pandemic is big. And so I feel like in many ways for us to make sure that we're getting everybody into the programs that currently exist, we need to look at the programs themselves and make sure they're broad enough and inclusive enough to include the people that may find themselves outside of it right now. And I think because, that, for example, the Canada Emergency Business Account loans, that $40,000 loan that's interest-free, that's gone to 800,000 businesses already, right? And I feel like there's too many still falling through the cracks, and many of them are among the folks that you actually just described. And so are there ways that we can make sure that those programs are better adapted to that rather than start from scratch? I mean, and build something new and different. I think for now, it's about getting through this pandemic period and then helping people get back on their feet and then helping them adjust into whatever the new economy or whatever it is that we're going to be coming into is going to look like. So I feel like, to me, that is the better way to go in the short term. And then we can talk about how we can sort of assist folks as we understand what new reality is going to look like in the coming months after this pandemic is over. So let's fix what we have out there because they're there, and I think that they can be more broadened to include, make sure they include folks that you're talking about in your question.
Ms. Labal, would you like to add to it?
Oui, je vous remercie.
Yes, thank you for asking that question, because when we look at the survey that was carried out by FAMISOL, women from diversity communities compared to Quebec natives experienced challenges related to the pandemic the same way, but women from cultural communities are faced with even more barriers than Canadian born or native women and generally white women. There are more barriers when it comes to funding, more difficulty receiving mentorship, receiving the right support according to their specific needs. You have given me the opportunity to say that financial programs are essential. My colleague here cited them, as well as assistance. That is essential as well. It's not all about signing a check and giving them financial support, but the women entrepreneurs have to be supported, particularly women from various communities, so that they go digital, retool, change their ways of providing services so that they can adapt to the context of the pandemic, or maybe change what they propose to the society that has a higher value and that is sustainable. That's the end of the time allotted to you. I'm sorry. We'll continue with Madame Larouche. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madame Labelle, let me give you the opportunity to continue your explanations. First of all, I also believe that post-pandemic recovery should be feminist and green. I'm surprised. Well, I see the figures, though I'm not surprised, because we know that women were at the front. How could such businesses be a greater opportunity for women who want to get into business? I'm talking about green and sustainable businesses. Let me tell you about the experiences we have on the field. In FEMISOL, we coach hundreds and thousands of women entrepreneurs. And something that is clear amongst many of these women is the desire to contribute to a better world with their businesses. Most of them set up businesses, of course, to create wealth, create businesses, but furthermore, they want to contribute to the common good and provide solutions to the society. But we are facing a great wall with climate change and the pandemic. The pandemic is just the beginning of a series of issues that could overhaul our economy. So right away, we need to change the way we work. And according to a survey, women entrepreneurs said that we need to change the economic model so that it's greener, it's more sustainable. That should be one of the 5 major priorities of the recovery. So this ties in with the values of women, and this could help stimulate the economy with more businesses and also allow more women take their place in the society. It will be easy to enhance the role of these women creating businesses. It's not the case now because we value more technologies, innovative technologies, exports, and so on. But women have a lot to bring to the current economy. I would like to conclude. You talked about assistance. We don't have models in politics for women. It's the same thing for you. So with your experience on the field, maybe we could have better adapted models. That's what you're recommending. Yes, coaching and assistance is the difference. 80% of the businesses we support survive because we help them. Because after 5 years, we come back to see how they have fulfilled the objectives. So I think that this model is also good for communities and diversity communities going through the same challenges, and they also need this coaching. And of course, thanks to federal funding, we could coach hundreds of female entrepreneurs, even from cultural communities.
Thank you. So just in terms of the former line of questioning that I had started before, Ms. Pullman, you have brought a really great recommendations, I think, forward to this committee for SEBA, for the wage subsidy, the rental subsidy, and so I'm really glad that and hope to see that within the report, of course. And I hear what you're saying because I've certainly heard it amongst my own constituents in London Fanshawe that there have been so many that have been left out. That all of these programs, while they're good and we're still figuring a lot of things out, this second wave, hopefully not a third one, will be the test of where we need to go and to ensure that we have the most coverage. And certainly New Democrats were pushing from the very beginning that something like CERB be universal, and that was to ensure that more people weren't left out. So in terms of these programs or going forward, how do we ensure that they are in fact universal and that we get the most coverage? Are there other programs that you see that could fill that and be on that larger scale so that no one's left behind?
So one thing I think that I've appreciated throughout the pandemic is, you know, this has been unprecedented for everybody, for governments too. And so I do want to give some credit to the government for introducing many different programs and being open to feedback and making changes to those programs as they learned about the impacts. But I don't think that has stopped. I think we need to continue to make improvements to the programs as we move forward. And so we've appreciated that there have been lots of changes and adjustments, and we also know that some of these are very complicated. But I think that there's a reality out there that there are businesses, and I will talk about new businesses in particular. There are a lot of businesses that have actually been started through the pandemic, because they started thinking about this, 6 months before the pandemic, and they had to start because that was where the direction was going. And they get nothing. Like, there is nothing available to them. And these are the people we want to boost up so that they can get through the pandemic and then move their business into, a new world. So I think that it's really about continuing to listen to the feedback. And I've appreciated that the government has done that. I do think that everybody's getting tired, and I've seen the sort of momentum slow down as well. And I think that's part of what's happening, but we can't, especially as we move into a second wave. And as you said, God forbid, a third wave. And I think there's a lot of frustration out there as small businesses watch, these large stores like Costco and Walmart be able to stay open because they have groceries, but they're selling also everything that they would normally sell, but they have to close down. So I think there's a lot of fundamental unfairness and a lot of burbling underneath of that this this isn't right. Like everybody wants to protect everyone's health and everybody wants to be able to make sure everybody's safe, but I think there's an unfairness lingering underneath, and I think governments need to respond to that. And the best way to do that is to figure out how to continue to expand the program so that we're making sure that everybody that's affected and hit by this is being helped in some form.
All right. Unfortunately, that's the end of our time for today. I just want to thank our witnesses. You've been tremendous. We could spend all day talking to you. You've been very helpful. So thank you, and thank you to all the members of the committee for your excellent questions. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Merci.